Hey guys, hope you're having a good one. Just wanted to take a quick second before we get into the video to establish a few things. First and foremost, this video is not about attacking Dan Slott. It's more about trying to question whether or not he understands what Spider-Man is. So, as such, this isn't going to be a full review of Spider-Man 789. More going to be talking about some of the previous stories that have happened, but it's because of 789 that I wanted to make this video. So we are going to be touching on it more than others. But as such, this isn't going to be about attacking Dan Slott. This isn't going to be about calling him names, though hyperbole may show up, which is purely for the sake of entertainment. So hopefully that's clear enough. And with that being said, thank you for watching. Enjoy the video. Hello, my fellow comic-loving people. Welcome to the first Homebred Comic Review, a show in which I hope to look at and analyze, deconstruct, and overall review good stories that I can recommend and bad stories that hopefully I can take a look at and explain why they don't work, maybe even take a chance to fix them. We'll see. Which is why the first video that I'm doing here today is going to be nothing like that formula that I hope to establish. Instead, I'm going to be talking about a certain point involving one of our favorite superheroes, Spider-Man, and why I don't believe Dan Slott fully understands who he's writing. Spider-Man. Ask any random person on the street if they know who Spider-Man is, and the answer will more than likely be yes. Movies, cartoons, and of course, comics. Spider-Man has a legacy that spans across multiple media outlets that few fantasy characters can boast of. Generations know of this character before even picking up a book. And yet his current writer seems to be more inclined to make Peter suffer than actually tell good stories. Yes, Dan Slott, the man who took over Spider-Man after the conclusion of One More Day, one of three stories that many would say is pretty much a low point for the web-slinger. For those not in the know, One More Day is of course the story in which Peter Parker and Mary Jane Watson sell their marriage to the devil in order to save the life of Aunt May. Fantastic writing. But that's one of three of Spider-Man's lowest points, if you ask most fans. The other one would be where it kind of started, really, with the Clone Saga, a story that was drawn out so long and became such a mess that nobody even knew what to do with it anymore, which I may talk about if we ever arrive at the Clone Conspiracy. The other story, which is one of Dan Slott's most infamous, is Superior Spider-Man. Now, this particular run didn't sit well with many fans. You see, the basic premise of this was that Otto Octavius, aka Dr. Octopus, and Peter switch brains, leaving Peter in Otto's dying body. After a battle or two, Peter dies in the body of one of his greatest enemies, leaving Otto to honor his memory as both Peter Parker and Spider-Man. And how does he do this? By getting his doctorate, starting a business, almost taking over the city, and... Wait. What? Oh yeah, almost forgot about that part. You see, despite his better attempts at being a good guy, even being part of the Avengers at some point, which he almost jeopardized entirely, Otto could not really fight his megalomaniacal nature. See, his ego would keep getting in the way of things, to where he wouldn't accept being second best at things. And there's plenty more to talk about with that. But in the end, the spirit of Peter Parker resurfaced. Don't ask. Maybe we'll get into that one day. But essentially, Peter was acting as his conscience, the little voice in the back of his head that was telling him to do good things. And occasionally it would work, and in one situation it did beautifully, in which Otto pretty much was caught between a rock and a hard place in his own brain, caught between should I act or should I think? Should I act or should I think? To which Peter tells him, don't think, act, save her. And Otto saves this little girl. And that moment leads to what I believe is my favorite moment from that series. The moment in which Otto Octavius erases himself from Peter's body, but before doing so tells him, "You are the superior Spider-Man." And that gets completely erased in the clone conspiracy. Again, we'll get to that. But, see, here's the thing. There were actual repercussions from this, because he earned a doctorate and started a company under Peter's name. And now Peter has just inherited this. So now he's a billionaire with more money than he knows what to even do with at this point. And yet, this is the Peter Parker we have been stuck with for a good long while now. Peter Parker, billionaire genius with his superhero identity, being his bodyguard and mascot. Wait, he's rich. His superhero identity is used in his company. He has someone wear his suit to keep up appearances, and a hot redhead won't date him. Why does that sound familiar? That's Iron Man! But that is not what we're here to talk about. What we're here to talk about is Dan Slott and why I don't think he really gets what Spider-Man is. He has a full understanding of what he is, not exactly who. You see, some time ago, Ethan Van Sciver was holding a stream in which Dan Slott was one of his first guests. And during that stream, when he was asked, "What is Spider-Man to you?" Slott says...
Before we go, why do you love Peter Parker?
I love Peter Parker because he's you. Spider-Man is you with superpowers. In the Marvel Universe, it's always the world outside your window. Something about it feels a little more real to me than the DC Universe, where to me the characters are more like gods. It's more like a pantheon of heroes. Marvel, it's more like a collection of misfits. It's these weird, if you got powers, they'd be stupid superpowers. You've got the powers of a spider. Like, that's weird. You walk up a wall, you're kind of gross, you know, spider sense. It's such a weird collection of powers. The thing I like about it, it all comes out of Amazing Fantasy 15. Spider-Man's you. He's not, yes, Peter Parker's a genius, but there's things about you that are special, whoever you are. Spider-Man's you. He's the guy down the block. He's the guy, he's your cousin. He's that guy you know from Brooklyn. He's that guy over there in Queens. He's someone you know. And he's you. He's the outcast. He's the nerd who got these powers and they mess up his life.
No, that was a pretty good answer. On the surface, if you just take it at face value, he seems to have an understanding. He seems to know what makes Spider-Man Spider-Man. The problem is, in the writing, it seems to not be applying it. So it makes it really seem as though he knows what the answer is, but he's not explaining it properly, at least through his writing. How can I explain that? With math. Now, if I ask you what is 2 plus 2, you will more than likely say 4, right? Of course. It's what we've learned to be the answer. When asked the question, we know the result. But now if I told you to explain 2 plus 2 and how it equals 4, that would be a bit of a different story. Here's how I would explain it. The problem of 2 plus 2 starts at 2. Then you bump it up twice. See, that's how I would explain the problem and show how and why I know the answer. Dan Slott seems to know the answer, but not why it's the answer. In short, he seems to know what Spider-Man is, but not who. And that's the biggest reason why I want to make this video. It's because I want to explain from my perspective what Spider-Man is to me. And why I believe that Dan Slott seems to have this whole thing backwards. See, this really started to pick up and kind of screamed that this needed to be talked about because of Amazing Spider-Man number 789, the first issue of his legacy run. Let's take a look. You see, this story takes place a little bit after the Secret Empire event, in which Peter effectively destroys Parker Industries. He is no longer a billionaire and is instead crashing on Bobby's couch. And from the dialogue, he comes off like a bum. This I can let slide a little bit, since it was a hard blow to him, losing his company and everything, so yeah, he'd be bummed out. Then we cut to what I can only describe as a tasteless jab at critics. Okay, so whether this was Slott himself, his editor, or the artist who made the decision to include this joke, let's make things very clear. It's not a funny joke. It's essentially a joke from the Mockingbird story, not even the story, however, a cover of issue 8. It's a tasteless joke, it's very stupid, and it's childish. I'm not going to talk about it today, because there's a lot to talk about with issue 8 of Mockingbird. However, this issue starts off with Peter at an extreme low point in his life, having destroyed his own company and the lives of thousands upon thousands of people. I can understand being a bit bummed out. However, he looks like he's crashing at her place and is essentially in this funk of, I don't want to do anything. I'm such a loser. Oh my god, I can't even. And that is frustrating as all hell. I'm sure it annoyed you as soon as I did it. That's essentially what we're reading about. What follows this is what I can only describe as anti-Spider-Man fan rhetoric. Fans of Spider-Man in any fashion will recall that J. Jonah Jameson will do anything and everything in his power to make Spider-Man out to be a bad guy. Slott felt that this was warranted to now be put on Peter, as he looks through channels that are basically talking about his lowest point, and Bobby even takes this to the next level by posting a little clip out from a newspaper saying he's a menace with little magnets spelling out ha, ha, ha. You are essentially punching him in the gut when he's at his lowest point. And here's one of the big problems that I have personally with this. Turning all the hatred onto Peter. One of the big things that makes Spider-Man as a hero relatable is the fact that he does good in spite of the fact that he gets hatred as Spider-Man. Peter Parker is the out for Spider-Man. If things get too tough, he sees he's wasting his time, or if he ever felt that he was risking too much or something, he can always retire and go back to being Peter. Just like in Amazing Spider-Man number 50, Spider-Man No More. This story, of course, involves Peter giving up the suit, giving up the title of Spider-Man because he no longer views it as worth it. The propaganda from the Daily Bugle has caused people to hate him. His time as Spider-Man is taking away the time he spends with his friends and family, even to the point where Aunt May falls very ill, and he feels extremely guilty because he wasn't there for her when she needed him most. His grades in college are slipping, pretty much ruining his future. Even careers that he's offered he has to pass up because he doesn't want to not be there in case Spider-Man is needed. The breaking point for him comes when J. Jonah Jameson offers a reward for the capture and unmasking of Spider-Man. He decides he has had enough, and he throws the suit away, deciding Spider-Man shall no longer impact his life, and that his time is done. He will resume being Peter Parker, and he is actually happy. He has time to spend with friends and family. He has time to dedicate to his studies, so he's not falling behind. He even has the chance to go with Gwen Stacy to a party. And on his way to help somebody, he hears a call for help. And he leaps into action almost instinctively. And that's because that's who Peter is. He did the right thing because he could. he couldn't fight it. He enjoyed the time away, but realizes that he needs to be Spider-Man, because his city needs the hero. And that is exactly who Peter is. He is the one who will be the hero, rather than the bystander. That is Spider-Man. That is Peter Parker. He gets stressed out. He gets frustrated. He hits breaking points. But what he's doing here? It's insulting because... just look! Peter actually goes to the Daily Bugle and throws what is essentially a hissy fit because an article about his screw-up was written and he doesn't like it. To which Peter is then confronted about it and shown why they wrote about him as they did. And Peter can't argue back with them because he realizes they're right. See, we're bringing back this dynamic of somebody being hated. The problem is, it's flipped. And it's going in the wrong direction. This shows Peter going up against something he hasn't really had to deal with. Evidence to prove he's a menace. For the longest time, it's just been Jameson just raving about the menace of Spider-Man, with no real evidence other than, I know you did it, Wallcrawler. Now he's going up against an actual journalist. But that's going to be swept aside because it seems he's going to be working for them as a science editor. And now we come to another moment, one in which is showing Slott has the idea of Spider-Man backwards, where Peter is chased by people and uses his spider powers to escape, kind of hinting at using his power as a means of escaping his life. And so Peter goes home, mopes about until Bobby comes back, tells him off because he hasn't done anything since she's been gone, and tells him they're going on patrol. Quick fight with the Griffin where people are actually reprimanding him for not helping in the Secret Empire event when the city was trapped in a dome of darkness. Long story. And finally, after the fight ends with Spider-Man saving a man's food truck with the crowd cheering him on, it's this moment that sparked this thought in my head. And thus, we hit the crux of this, and why I don't feel Dan gets it. He's trying to actively make Peter the unappealing one, and pushing that he should be Spider-Man more. That's not how it works. Spider-Man is not the character, it's just the mask. Dan Slott seems to be trying to make Spider-Man the person, and Peter the alias. And that goes against everything Spider-Man. Spider-Man is a guy who screwed up, learned from the one big mistake in his life, and is doing everything that he can to make sure that never happens again. He made one very big mistake in his life, and he's paid that price. And that's one of the biggest reasons why people love him. Because we've all made a mistake. We've all made one big screw up in our lives that we regret to this very day. And we've learned from that mistake. Whether it's talking horribly to a family member, or telling off a friend that you wish you could talk to again, but now you've burned the bridge. You're gonna learn from that mistake. Maybe it's you broke something that you can never replace. But we've all done something. That's why Peter Parker is the one who is the relatable one, not Spider-Man. Because it was Peter's choice that led to what happened. The reason with great power comes great responsibility is the go-to phrase. Is because it's to tell us that if we have the capability to do something good, then we should. If we can stop and help somebody, we should. Because we can. And it's the right thing to do. Dan, however, just takes that and runs with it without fully understanding what it means. Going back to the mathematics, it's like saying, I understand the problem. I understand the problem. I know the answer. But not understanding how you get to that answer, not understanding why it's the answer. And that's something that's very, very crucial. Dan has spoken about his love of Spider-Man, and when you hear him tell the story, you get the genuine feeling that he does love the character. But when he writes him, you don't feel that same passion, or at least I don't. And that breaks my heart, because as a fan of Spider-Man, hell, he's the reason one of my favorite characters even exists. And he's being mishandled. He's not a billionaire, he's not some super soldier or space hero, he's not a god, he's not a monster fighting to prove he's not a monster, and he's not some super spy. He's a regular guy who does the right thing because it's the right thing to do. He faces tragedy, he hits low points, he has falling outs with friends and his family. It's why when people say Spider-Man is you, they mean it. Because when Spider-Man faced problems, they were a bit more down to earth and resonated with more people. Peter Parker is someone I related to when I was younger. My first interaction with the character of Spider-Man and Peter Parker was through the animated TV show that showed up on Fox Kids. I watched that character, and he was extremely developed. He went through turmoil. He went through confusing times. He had actual dilemmas where he would have to make a choice between his personal life or his life as Spider-Man. He had to always try and find the balance. And that's the core of the character. Trying to find the balance between doing the right thing and trying to do what's right for you. Because he's not selfish, but the other factor is he has his own life. He's not somebody that can just give up everything and do the right thing 24/7. He has to be sometimes selfish. And all we've seen is Peter try to do the right thing, it blows up in his face, and he's basically just, it all just kind of snowballed until eventually Secret Empire came along and the avalanche just occurred. And now we're back at square one, but in reverse. And quite honestly, if you want to read a decent Spider-Man book right now, I highly recommend Spectacular Spider-Man being written by Chip Zdarsky. The first 5 issues are kind of but issue 6, that's the start of something very important. And I may go into it if I ever touch on the book on this show, but for right now, I highly recommend you check it out. But with Dan, he seems to have forgotten that Peter comes first, and Spider-Man is the means to protect people. The people he cares about. Innocent people who have no reason to be in danger. And he seems to be flipping that and making Spider-Man the more important person in Peter's life. Or the more important alias in Peter's life. But that's just how I see it. And I felt as though this issue was just a betrayal of Peter Parker as a character, and is trying to push him in a direction he doesn't need to, nor should he go. A path that's just all punishing Peter. As of this video, recent developments have actually occurred. You see, Dan Slott is actually going to be off of the Spider-Man books pretty soon. And his final story will be him versus the Green Goblin. Now, I cannot deny the fact that I'm actually kind of happy that he's off the book, or going to be off the book. But at the same time, I kind of wish he would have taken some of the advice or critique that people have given him. My biggest one is stop writing him like Tony Stark. I may get into that as well, but it's not about saying that Dan Slott can't write Spider-Man. or that he shouldn't write Spider-Man. It's that he should have been getting better at writing Spider-Man. He should have gotten better at writing Peter Parker. And those are my feelings. I don't want him to just be completely off of the book unless he can't do anything. So, hopefully the next writer that comes along will be doing something better. So, I think that's going to do it for this, guys. And those are my closing thoughts on this. With that recent development of Slott being off of the book, it's going to be an interesting take to see who's going to be picking up the mantle. Who's going to be the next one to write Amazing Spider-Man? Maybe we'll get somebody better and we'll get back to Peter Parker being Peter Parker. Or maybe we're just going to end up with somebody worse who doesn't quite get it. Time will tell, and I will definitely be keeping an eye on this. So, from the bottom of my heart, thank you guys for watching. It's the start of something new here, and hopefully you guys will take the ride with me. Let's see where we go. Until then, I'll see you then.